Nice haircut, Brother Mahadir. Zafai.
Thank you.
He's your barber.
Thank you. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Thank you all very much for joining us for another night of Muharram Majalis 2020 between Leeds Muslim Youth Group and Baab-Ul-Ilm Masjid Leeds. Today we have an extended program to include Da'a Kumel inshallah, as well as a special video playing of a Noha by Brother Imran Datu at the end. And we'd like to welcome for the recitation of the Holy Quran, Brother Salim with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والسماء والطارق وما أدراك ما الطارق النجم الثاقب إن كل نفس لما عليها حافظ فلينظر الإنسان مما خلق من ماء دافق يخرج من بين الصلب والترائب إنه على رجعه لقادر يوم تبلى السرائر فما له من قوة ولا ناصر والسماء ذات الرجع والأرض ذات الصدع إنه لقول فصل وما هو بالهزل إنهم يكيدون كيدا وأكيد كيدا فمهل الكافرين أمهلهم رويدا صدق الله العلي العظيم.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Inshallah, we will now proceed with the recitation of Dua Kumel. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. يا دائم الفضل على البرية يا باسط اليدين بالعطية يا صاحب المواهب السنية صل على محمد وآله خير الورى السجية واغفر لنا يا ذا الأولى في هذه العشية واغفر لنا يا ذا الأولى في هذه العشية. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء وخضع له كل شيء وذل له كل شيء وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء، وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء، وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء، وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء، وبنور وجهك الذي أضاء له كل شيء، يا نور يا قدوس، يا نور يا قدوس، يا نور يا قدوس، يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك الإسام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغير النعام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء، اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها، اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك وأستشفع بك إلى نفسك، وأسألك بجودك أن تدنيني من قربك، وأن توزعني شكرك، وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤال خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تسامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا، وفي جميع الأهوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجته، وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك، وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك، وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك، ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوب غافرا ولا لقبائح ساترا ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي ظلمت نفسي. وتجرأت بجهلي وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك. اللهم مولاي كم من قبيح سترته، وكم من فاضح من البلاء أقلته، وكم من عثار وقيته، وكم من مكروه دفعته، وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم عظم بلائي وافرط بي سوء حالي، وقصرت بي أعمالي، وقعدت بي أغلالي، وحبسني عن نفعي بعد آمالي، وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها ونفسي بجنايتها وإبطالي. يا سيدي فأسألك بعزتك ألا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعلي، ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليك من سري، ولا تعجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملت في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وساءتي ودوام تفريطي وجالتي وكثرة شاتي وغفلتي، وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا، وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي من لي غيرك، أسأله كشف الضر والنظر في أمري. إلهي ومولاي أجريت لي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي، ولم أحترس فيك من تزيين عدوي، فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء، فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حضورك، وخالفت بعض أوامرك، فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاءك، وألزمني حكمك وبلاغك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذنبا معترفا، لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني، ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في سعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري، وفكني من شد وثاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي، يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتغذيتي، هدي لابتداء كرمك وصالف برك بي يا إلهي يا سيدي يا ربي. أتراك معذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولهج به من لساني من ذكرك، واعتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي وضعي خضعا لربوبيتك. هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيته، أو تبعد من أدنيت، أو تشرد من آويته، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من كفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي أتسلط النار على وجوه خرات لعظمتك ساجدة، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقة وبشكرك مادحة، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققة، وعلى نحوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح سعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة ما كذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا رب يا كريم يا رب يا كريم يا رب يا كريم يا رب، وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وقرباتها وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكفوه يسير بقاؤه قصير مدته، فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل وقوع المكاره فيها وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض يا سيدي. فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين، يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو ولما من هذه وأبكي لأليم العذاب وشدته عن طول البلاء ومدته، فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهمني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي، صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك، وأبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النذر إلى كرامتك، أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك، فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا، لئن تركتني ناطقا لأدجن إليك بين أهلها دجيج العاملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين. يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين ويا إله العالمين، أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريلته، وهو يدج إليك دجيج مؤمل لرحمتك ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي، فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك، أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يأمل فضلك ورحمتك، أم كيف يهرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه، أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه، أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه، أم كيف تسجر زبانيته ويعديك يا رباه، أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتترك فيها، هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك، فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك وغديت به من إخلاد مالديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما لكنك تقدست أسماءك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأن تجل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما فمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدمتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلوت من عليك أجريتها أن تهب لي هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبته وكل قبيح أسررته وكل جهل عملته كتمته أو أعلنته أخفيته أو أظهرته وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنكم وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير تنزله أو إحسان تفضله أو بر تنشره أو رزق تبسطه أو ذنب تغفره أو خطأ تستره يا رب يا رب يا رب يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي يا من بيده ناصيتي يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا رب يا رب يا رب أسألك بحقك وقدسك وعظم صفاتك واسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك معمولة وبخدمتك موسولة وأعمالي عندك مقبولة حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي يا من عليك وولي يا من إليك شكمت أحوالي يا رب يا رب يا رب يا رب يا رب يا رب قو على خدمتك جوارحي واشتد على لازمة جوارحي وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال من خدمتك حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين وأسرع إليك في المبادرين واشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين وأخافك مخافة الموقنين وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فرد ومن كادني فكد واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك وأقربهم منزلة منك وأخسهم زلفة لديك فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك وجد لي بجودك وعطف علي بمجدك واحفظني برحمتك واجعل لساني بذكرك ليجاه وقلبي بحبك متيم ومن علي بحسن إجابتك وأقلني عثرتي واغفر زلتي فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك وأمرتهم بذلك وأمنت لهم الإجابة فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي فبعزتك استجب ندائي وبلغني مناي ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي يا سريع رضا يا سريع رضا يا سريع رضا يا سريع رضا اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء فإنك فعال لما تشاء يا من اسمه دواء وذكره شفاء وطاعته ضياء ارحم من رأس مالك الرجاء وسلاحه البكاء يا سابغا يا دافع النقام يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام يا عالم لا يعلم صل على محمد وآل محمد وفعل به وأنت أهله وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Ahsant, Brother Koresh, thank you very much for a spiritual recitation. And now, inshallah, as we move forward for Samahat al-Shaykh, just a quick reminder that this year, because of COVID, we're not able to attend the normal Ashura program. So we will update you in a few days regarding the special program for that day. And this year, because the Leeds Jama'at have, since its inception, having the tradition of preparing Halim on the 10th night of Muharram and offering it on the 10th day as Niyaz, in keeping with this tradition, there are many volunteers that are offering to cook and, inshallah, for you to collect this niyaz. So for those who would like to have some niyaz in keeping with this tradition on the day of Ashura, the deadline is tomorrow. And if you follow the registration link that's been sent out on WhatsApp, you can register, inshallah. And with that, it's time for Samahat al-Shaykh. Don't forget, you can post your questions online by following the Menti link. Tonight, Samahat al-Shaykh Ali Raza is talking about the companions that didn't make it, how and what was the reason. And with that, we would like to make him welcome with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بأبي عبد الله الحسين alayhi salam. We pray for all those around the world, especially in these difficult times. Let us remember them all with a Surah Fatiha before we start. So yesterday we looked at a few themes at how the companions of the Prophet reacted in certain situations, such as the battles that they undertook with the Prophet, the battles of Badr, Uhud, Khandaq, Khaybar. Now, we saw the mentality that these companions had. These companions were able to channel their energy in a positive way. And we also took from that, hopefully, that we can try in our own lives, because it is relatable to our own lives, how when we are faced with different challenges, how to deal with these different challenges, how to take lesson. Because as Allah says in the Quran, that we will most definitely test you. Allah tests us. You may ask, if Allah is all loving, why does He have to test us? But it's only by testing us that we are able to grow and become better human beings. If we aren't given that stimuli, if we aren't given that ability to bring out our potential, then we will stagnate, and hence Allah tests us. We saw that in the Battle of Badr, for example, how a small number of individuals was able to defeat a large number of individuals. The mindset that they had, and the mindset in our own lives that we can adopt in whatever capacity it may be it something like sitting your exams, or be it something like a job, or whatever it may be. The mentality, the mindset that these these Sahaba had, and the Ahlul Bayt had, is something that is very worthy of following. So today, what we will look at, inshallah, is a few companions, a few incidents in the lives of the prophets that we can take lesson from, because there are certain companions who may have gone or disobeyed, or have gone a different path. So there's still things that we can take from, even from the story of Shaitan. Allah mentions the story of Shaitan very vividly in the Quran, when Allah calls out and tells the angels, "Usjudu li Adam, fasajada al-malaikati kulluhum illa Iblis. Aba wastakbar." All of the angels prostrated except Iblis. He had pride and he refused, therefore. So the story of Iblis in and of itself is something that we can take from, and not saying that the companions are like that, not at all, but we can take lesson from any and every situation. This is something that those who read the Quran, those who try and understand the Quran can look at every part and every angle and take lessons from. Now, before we go into the stories of the companion, I'd like to outline that the certain prophets also were in situations where their companions may have not obeyed them, or not even their companions, their communities may have disowned them. We see that in the life of our own prophet. We see the life of many other prophets before us, before the Holy Prophet. And these are lessons for us to take. How did these prophets face or reciprocate in that situation? What was the mindset of these prophets? How were they composed in those situations? We look at, for example, if you see on the slide, in regard to the story of Musa, where, for example, Allah speaks and says that Musa is told to enter this city, this town. And he tells his people, that his companions, that let's enter this. And the companions say, لن ندخلها أبدا ما داموا فيها فاذهب أنت وربك فَقَاتَلَا إِنَّهَا هُنَا قَائِدُونَ. Musa tells, the companions of Musa tell Musa that you and your Lord go to the city. Whilst these people are there. There was an army perhaps. We are sitting here, you and your Lord go. Imagine the state Musa would be in. You probably angry. But how did he react in that situation? What was the mindset? Was that of a loser? Of course not. And we find that in Karbala, that these individuals did not adopt that mindset of being losers. Rather, they adopted the mindset of being winners. And of course, as we see in the verses after, he calls out to Allah and asks Allah to separate between the good and the bad. And then Allah also banishes them in the desert for 40 years or so. Another story that is also mentioned, as you can see on the slide, is that of Nuh alayhi salam. فَقَالَ الْمَلَأُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا مِنْ قَوْمِهِ مَا نَرَاكَ إِلَّا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُنَا وَمَا نَرَاكَ اتَّبَعُكَ إِلَّا الَّذِي هُمْ أَرَاذِلُنَا بَادِيَ الرَّأْيِ وَمَا نَرَى لَكُمْ عَلَيْنَا مِنْ فَضْلٍ بَلْ نَظُنُّكُمْ كَاذِبِينَ. News people, and these were those who are high up in the society. They was telling Nuh that we don't see you except as a normal human being, and nobody follows you except those who are the lowest of class. But Nuh never gives up hope. You see, Nuh is mentioned in the Quran, إِنَّهُ كَانَ عَبْدًا شَكُورًا, that he was he was not shakir. He was constantly grateful. He was always grateful. Despite all that they sent his way, he was grateful. And that gratitude is something that is so powerful. Imagine yourself in a situation where you lose something. You may lose a job, and many have lost jobs in this current climate. Or you may lose a dear one, or whatever afflicts you. You have two options. One is to feel sorry for yourself, to overcome yourself with emotion of sadness, which is fine to have sadness, but to make yourself overcome by it such that it causes stagnation for a long time is something that we need to address. Or you could have the attitude of, okay, this has afflicted me. I am sad. I acknowledge that I'm sad. However, what I will do is channel this energy and do something positive from it. Okay, I've lost something. But now, for example, you have all these stories of individuals in this current pandemic who've lost jobs, but that has given them the opportunity, the free time to do extra stuff. For example, stuff that they have always wanted to do but never had the opportunity to do. Whereas if you went with that mentality of feeling sorry for yourself, instead of utilizing that energy that you have in doing something, we'd just be sad and overcome by that. So there are two mentalities that we can adopt. One is that of ungratefulness, and that by being ungrateful of the blessings of God in terms of not utilizing your energy, or that of gratefulness, where you can utilize and look at the good in everything. I know at times it may be difficult. I know that sometimes people go through what they go through, and they may not seem to be light at the end of the tunnel, but one needs to persevere. As we see in Karbala, we see in the Prophet's life, we see in all these individuals' lives, how they were tested, and they were tested to the extreme, to the nth level. But yet, they adopted an attitude of being grateful, of looking at the good, of appreciating what they had instead of what they didn't have. This is something for us to take from this whole incident of Karbala at the very least, that of being grateful. Now going on to the companions that didn't make it. let's look at the life of Imam Ali. And at his time, there was a very difficult situation. As we see, Imam Ali, after he became the caliph, he was faced with different groups. To give a prelude to that, just before the caliphate of Imam Ali was Uthman. And Uthman, at the very last days of his life, the people started revolting. They had laid siege on his palace, and they were preventing any provisions from entering the palace. Eventually, they stormed the palace and they killed him. Now, Imam Ali, in that situation, when he heard that they were preventing provisions going to the palace, water, food, essentials, he didn't like it. And in fact, he sent Hassan and Hussein and told them to take food and water to the palace. Look at the akhlaq of Imam Ali, how he allowed provisions to go to anybody. He allowed the essential provisions to go to these individuals. Regardless of what was going around, he made sure that they had water and food at the very least. So after the death of Uthman, there's an uproar in the Muslim community because the people weren't happy with the situation. They attacked the palace, they killed Uthman. Now they come to Imam Ali. They ask him to be the caliph. And as we know in the khutbahs in Nahj al-Balagha, that he said, I don't want this caliphate. This caliphate is worthless to me, less than the sandals of my shoes, the straps on my sandals. He didn't want this worldly position. However, after insistence, he took office, worldly office. Now, what happened therein is that a group of individuals started claiming that they're here to rise up for the blood of Uthman. And they then gathered armies and went and fought Imam Ali. So Imam Ali had three groups, according to his khutbahs in Nahj al-Balagha. He mentions three types of people: the nakithin, as you can see on the slide, al-mariqun, wal-qasitun. There are three different types of groups that he went against. The nakithun were those who broke the allegiance, nakatha, to break, to untie. They broke their allegiance. Now, from that camp was Talha, Zubair, the wife of the Prophet Aisha. They gathered together and they went and got an army from Basra. They, as we know, the battle is known as the Battle of the Camel. They came towards, and Imam Ali sent an army towards to fight them. Now, amongst them was these esteemed companions, Talha, Zubair, close companions of the Prophet. Talha, according to some, was one of the earliest who accepted Islam. He was one of those six within the council to choose the next caliph after the second caliph. He was one of the six, shows his high status. Now, when he comes to the battlefield of Jamal, according to some narratives, he fled the battle, but he was killed by people in the army against Imam Ali. He was killed by his own army members. Zubair, another grand companion, right? He sacrificed a lot for the Prophet, for Islam. He was also one of the six in that council after the second caliph, and he voted for Imam Ali to be the next caliph. They're very proximate to the Prophet, fought by with Imam Ali in battles with the Prophet. In the battle of Jamal, Imam Ali reminds him, remember the saying of the Prophet. What will you do when you fight against Ali? Zubair is shaken and he leaves. He doesn't fight. He is eventually killed. Imam Ali is angered at the person who kills him. So the people at that time, they are confused. Some come to Imam Ali, say that who should we follow? On one side, we have Talha, Zubair, the wife of the Prophet. We have all these individuals. Who should we follow? Imam Ali doesn't say, follow me. He says, اعرف الحق تعرف أهله. Know the truth, and then you'll know its people. Be objective. Look around you. Look and search. And don't fall into, as we mentioned yesterday, this mob mentality. As we see time and time again, many of the factors that cause this situation amongst individuals and amongst people is going with the flow, without thinking, without utilizing the rationality, without taking a step back. So it's very important. One of these factors why people go and do things that they regret is they go with the flow. They don't take some time out. They don't reflect. So this is something that we need to try and practice. That if something is going on and we know there's a small voice telling us that don't do this or do this, we should take a step back and reflect and think about what's going on. And once we do that, we can make a more informed decision. So that's one group, the nakithun. The next group is the mariqun. The mariqun were maraqa is to leave the arrow. The mariqun are those who have left the fold of Islam, referring to the Khawarij. Now the Khawarij, as we also alluded to yesterday, they fought with Imam Ali in the Battle of Siffin. They were these very radical Puritanists, took everything literally. When the Quran was put on the spheres, they are the ones who prevented Imam Ali from continuing the battle. There was a muhakama, there was a judgment, there was a sort of arbitration. Of course, Imam Ali and his side, the tricks that were played in this arbitration weren't in favor of Imam Ali's army. However, this group of individuals, because Imam Ali took arbitration, they considered him to be kafir. They were that extreme, doing takfir of everybody. Everybody who does a small sin or a big sin, is kafir. So they considered Imam Ali kafir, they considered this person kafir, that person kafir. However, some attributes that they had, one of the leaders of them was Abdullah bin Wahab al-Rasibi. He was known as the person with a calloused forehead because of his extreme lengthy prostrations. Now, this puts into perspective what is ibadah and what is ibadah supposed to bring about. Lengthy prostrations, if they don't bring about humility within the self, one can ask that isn't really prostration. Prostration is that which you submit fully to God. It isn't an act that causes you to get the signs of prostration. The signs of prostration are within ourselves when we submit to the will of God. Ibn Muljim was also from amongst the Khawarij, fought with Imam Ali in Jamal. What happened? Then Imam Ali fights these Khawarij in Nahrawan. He kills many of them. Ibn Muljim is one of those who escape. 3 of them gather. They say that one is going to kill Imam Ali, one is going to kill Muawiyah, one is going to kill Amr al-As. Ibn Muljim was successful in striking Imam Ali with a poisoned sword. So these are the situation. These are the situation that Imam Ali was going through amongst his companions. People that left him at times joined the other side. It shows a person's integrity and what they stand for, and more importantly, ourselves. Do we have these attributes that, if one day we're here, tomorrow we're on that side? Do we have principles? The third group are the qasitun, those who had transgressed, referring to Muawiyah and his army. You see, what happened is after the death of Uthman, Muawiyah also raised an army, huge army, and they met in the Battle of Siffin. Muawiyah, again, son of Abu Sufyan, who was there at the time of the Prophet. In fact, Abu Sufyan came to Imam Ali after the death of the Prophet. He said, I can raise an army and get you to be the Caliph. Imam Ali saw through it and he said, no, how can I fight? Islam is so new. And you want us to go back to the Jahili sort of period where we would just fight each other? He knew the trickery. He knew what the consequences could be. And he declined. He didn't want that. He didn't want the bloodshed for the Ummah. So these are the situations that Imam Ali faced amongst people that may have been close to him, amongst those who may have been at the time of the Prophet, who knew the status that he was in. Another situation, as we mentioned the past few nights, is that of Imam Hassan, how people left him, his close companion and cousin left him. At the time of Imam Hussein, we have these people who sent lots of letters to Imam Hussein from Kufa. Imam Hussein, according to some narratives, received bags full of letters. He sent his companion and his close cousin, Muslim ibn Aqil, to go to Kufa. Muslim goes, he receives a grand welcoming, but then Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad enters as the governor. And these individuals who were calling Imam Hussein, they ran away, they disappeared, they became scared. And Muslim was left alone, eventually was killed. One of these individuals who called Imam Hussein was Sulaiman bin Surad al-Khuzai, one of the chiefs of the Shias in Kufa. He disagreed with Imam Hassan in the peace treaty with Muawiyah. It shows that there isn't a black and white amongst the companions. There is this diversity, there is difference of opinion even amongst them. He was one of those who sent letters to Imam Hussein. For whatever reason, he wasn't there to help Imam Hussein in Karbala. However, he led a group, a movement called the Tawabun. And this group of individuals were repentant because of not joining Imam Hussein's army. They gather a number of soldiers, they go and they fight Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad at a place called Ainul Warda. Most of them, if not all of them, are killed. Now, the differing opinions are on this, but some say that they were genuine in their repentance and hence maybe Allah can forgive them. However, there is this dynamic which you can see amongst the companions. If we were in that situation, if Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad enters Kufa, and it's very important to put ourselves in that situation, because then we can realize if we have these tendencies or not. If we were in that situation, would we be scared? Would we stand up and join Imam Ali? Or would we just, be silent? These are things that we need to identify within ourselves. And there are many others that were there at the time of Imam Hussein that left him or recognized his status and didn't join him. For example, Shimr, right? Shimr was one that fought alongside Imam Ali in the Battle of Siffin. And he was, he recognized the status of them. Umar Sa'd is an individual who recognized, he was the faqih, he recognized the status of Imam Hussein. In fact, when Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad sent Umar Sa'd, he was initially going to send Umar Sa'd to quash a rebellion somewhere. And then he changed his mind, he said, go and fight al-Hussein. Umar Sa'd was hesitant. He knew that al-Hussein was the grandson of the Prophet. He knew the status that Hussein had. And he says, if I have to go into battle with Hussein, then I'm not willing to go. Ibn Ziyad tells him that, I will appoint you the governor of Ray, and I will suspend you if you do not go. And Umar Sa'd had this greed in him. He wanted to be the governor of Ray. Ray was a rich land in modern day Iran, and he wanted to be that governor. It was a rich land, but he had his hesitation to fight Imam Hussein. He said, give me some time, let me think. He comes back, he tells Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad that, look, I don't want to fight him, he's who he is, he's a very high status. Ubaidullah said, fine, I'll appoint somebody else as the governor and you can go away. However, because of his greed, he says, okay, I will go and fight Al-Hussein. And in their interactions on the day of Karbala, we see that Hussein tells Umar Isa that you will not even taste the wheat of Ray. And Umar Asad very arrogantly says, then I will have the barley of it. But he doesn't end up being the governor of Ray anytime, even after the death of Al-Hussein. It shows greed. And greed sometimes is a very bad thing to have. We need to understand, again, bringing it back to ourselves, because it's all good talking about these stories, narrating these stories, crying over these individuals. But we need to take some lessons. We need to implement it in our lives. Do we have these tendencies within us? If we were in that situation, what would we do? Very important. So take some time out, think about it. Amongst the other companions, as we go through history, we find that many Imams, many of the Ahlul Bayt had companions who were close to them, companions that were worthy of mention, worthy of following. And there were also those who betrayed the Imam. Some of the Imam's own families members would, claim imamat, for example. So we have this dynamic even amongst the family, which brings us to the question, what is the criterion of gaining proximity to God? Is it family lineage? As we see in the Arab custom at the time, that family lineage was something that was held very high, that people of a certain tribe were respected, people of other tribes were less respected. Is that the criterion that Allah outlines in the Quran? We see clearly it isn't. In the Quran, Allah mentions, "Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum." The most high, most noble in the eyes of Allah is the person who is God conscious. God consciousness is the criteria. It doesn't matter which family you're from. In fact, some narrations mention that Imam Sajjad is by the Kaaba. He's crying out to God. He's calling out to God. He's doing a dua. He faints. He wakes up. One of the people over there comes and holds him. He said, even you, O son of the Prophet, even you are asking like this. Imam says, woe be to you. Have you not heard the verse of the Quran? Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The most honorable in the eyes of Allah is that who is God conscious. It isn't family relations that will help you on the day of judgment. You can't say that you are from this family that will automatically make you enter paradise. No, rather it's your actions. As we see time and time again in the Quran, Allah talks about good deeds, actions, faith. All these things bring you close to God and would give you salvation. Lineage is not important in the eyes of God. In fact, the Prophet came and broke these idols. When there was a warfare, and this was something that was integral to the communities at the time, that they used to engage in warfare and get booty, war booty. Allah says, فَإِذَا غَنِمْتُم مِّن شَيْءٍ فَأَنَّ لِلَّهِ خُمُسَهُ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينِ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ. That when you have this war booty, He divides it into 6 portions, and then He brings about an equitable, transference of these goods, so that society benefits from it. Whereas prior to this point, what used to happen is the chief of a tribe would take a large sum of money. But here the prophetic injunction, the Quranic injunction is that of no, only 20% of that war booty is going to these 6. The rest is shared equally amongst the participants of the war. Islam brings about this. It tries and breaks this tribalism. When the Muhajir and the Ansar were made brothers, the rich were made brothers with the poor. The person from this tribe was made brothers with another person from a low tribe. The aristocrats were made brothers with the poor and the downtrodden. So you see, Islam came and broke all these different idols that were there in that society. Unfortunately, today we have situations where people go back to that pre-Islamic Jahiliyyah tendency of saying we are from this family or that family, etc. This isn't what the Prophet wanted. This isn't what the Prophet envisioned. Now we see standing firm and standing by your principles is something that is very important. As we've seen in these different companions, some companions were bought over either by money, by wealth, or because everybody else was doing it, they were doing it. They just went into. People on the day of Ashura in the army of Yazid were crying when they saw, for example, a baby being slaughtered. What use is their tears if they didn't reform themselves? You see, tears in and of themselves isn't valuable, but tears that bring about a reformation is something that is commendable. They were going with the flow. They didn't go against it. Some were scared. I ask myself this: am I scared? Am I scared of going against the grain when I see something wrong being done? These are questions that we need to ask. These are questions that we need to ponder upon and build upon ourselves. So we go on to the plains of Karbala. Now we know that one of these individuals, these brave warriors, was none other than Abbas. Abbas was this grand warrior that in the battle of Siffin, a masked man comes from the army of Imam Ali and engages in battle. And he engages in such skillful swordsmanship that the enemy gets scared. They say that this is none other than Ali. And then all of a sudden, Ali marches right next to him. They say, who is this masked swordsman? And he removes the mask. And it is none other than Abbas. Abbas was this man who stood by his principles. In fact, on the day preceding Ashura, Umar Saad sends a message to Abbas. He said, we are from the same family. Come and join us. We will give you amnesty. Abbas, enraged, tells him to get away. These are the principles that he stood by. On the day of Ashura, Abbas is there. He is agitated. He is seeing all his companions, Imam Hussein's companions and family being killed. He asks Hussein, can I go to the battle? Hussein says, if you go, we won't have any army. We won't have a flag bearer. Abbas looks around. He says, there isn't any army for there to be a flag bearer. Imam says, okay, go and get some water for the children. Abbas takes a water gourd and goes towards the river. As he goes towards the river, they recognize this is Abbas. They all run away. Abbas comes to the river. He puts his hands in the river. He cups a hand of water. He brings it to himself and then he throws it. He says, Ya nafs min ba'd al-Husayn huni wa min ba'dihi in kunti la takuni. هذا حسين شارب المنون وتشربين البارد المعين. He tells his soul, O nafs, leave this water. After Hussein, you won't be. And if you are, then don't be. This is Hussein who is drinking from death and you are drinking from some cold water. He threw the water. He fills up his gourd. He goes towards the tent. As he goes towards the tent, they come from behind and chop off his right hand. He says, Wallahi in qata'tumu yamini, inni uhami abadan an dini. He says, by God, even if you are to cut off my right hand, I will protect the religion and I will protect the imam that is rightful. As he goes forward, they come and chop off his left hand. He says, Ya nafs, la takhshi min al-jabbari. O nafs, don't be scared of these treacherous people. I give you glad tidings of the most merciful. As he goes forward and Hussein is looking, he is seeing the standard coming towards him. Then all of a sudden the standard stops and is still. They pierce the water gourd. They pierce his eye with an arrow. They strike him from the back. And as you know, when a person falls, he uses his hands to cushion his fall. But Abbas falls onto the ground with no hands and with arrows all around him. The standard bearer, the flag, falls to the ground. Hussein sees that falling to the ground. He rushes and he goes towards Abbas. He carries Abbas, he puts him on his lap. He asks this, Abbas says, "Oh man, let me see my master before you kill me." He says, Hussein tells him, "Oh Abbas, it is me, your brother." He says, "My apologies, oh brother, I can't see." Abbas is there in the laps of Al-Hussein. He says, "Let me take you to the camp, oh Abbas." Abbas says, "No, Hussein, leave me here. I'm too ashamed to go back to the tent without any water." Abbas, he leaves this world, and Imam Hussein shouts out, "Al-an inkasarat dhahri." Now my back is broken. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أحسن شيخنا تقبل الله مجمعين. Thank you very much, Sheikhna, for your lecture and for the recitation of Al-Maqtal. And now, dear audience, it's your opportunity to have your questions answered by Samahat Sheikh. If you haven't already, you can follow the link on Menti and submit your questions confidentially online. Sheikhna, first question here. If Iblis was so close to Allah spiritually and had absolute certainty in Allah and the last day and his punishment, why has he not yet done Tawbah?
As mentioned in the past few nights, Tawbah is something that we need to get rid of the tendency within ourselves. There is a theoretical element of knowledge. Knowledge that God has created everything. God is the one who fashions everything. There is a hereafter, there is hell. Iblis knows that fully well. He is, in terms of knowledge, he has full knowledge. If you are to debate him in theology, it probably defeat you in that and convince somebody that God is there, that God exists, and that he is merciful, etc. He knows fully well. But there is a tendency of pride within himself. And until and unless he would get rid of that, then only would he do tawbah. And we see this in ourselves sometimes, that somebody does or we do something wrong. And we know that we're wrong. But because of the pride that we have within ourselves, we don't want to apologize, for example, or we find it hard to apologize. Theoretically, we know what is wrong, but psychologically or within ourselves, we don't want to do that because of that ego. And that ego, once it's overcome, it's a difficult thing to do. But once it's overcome, that's when the tawbah would come.
Ahsan Sheikhna. Next question. If companions like Zuhair were initially sincere, why did they choose to disobey Imam Ali, despite being at Ghadir and obviously hearing the Prophet's statement?
Yeah, a very good question. Zubair, in fact, was also one of those, according to some narrations, disputed the event of Saqifa. As we know, after the death of the Prophet, some companions gathered together to choose the next caliph. Zubair was one of those, according to some narratives, to dispute that. But as we see, it isn't black and white, that a person is good and or has certain beliefs, and that's consistent throughout. Even in our own lives, sometimes we may believe something, but someone may convince us otherwise in something else. Zubair may have been in that situation where he was convinced otherwise, and hence he went and stood against Ali. So it could have been convincing of others. And he, in fact, Imam Ali was angry at the person who killed Zubair. In fact, Zubair left the army. Of course, there's a debate around this, whether he actually did tawbah. If he did, he should have joined the army of Hussein. This is a whole point of discussion. But as we see in history, it isn't black and white. that there is this there's this dynamism within the Sahaba, within close companions of the Prophet and the Imams, that one day they're here, tomorrow they may have another belief, and sometimes they come back. So there is this dynamism.
Ahsan Shaykhna. Next question. Is hopelessness or despondency really a major sin worse than murder?
On the day of Arafah, one of the biggest sins is despondency, because as the narration mentions, that a person comes to the Imam and he is despairing of Allah's mercy. So Imam says, woe to you. That is the biggest sin that you can do. Now, despondency, despair is basically doubting God's will or God's mercy. So it's up there in the sins. Murder is another type of sin. It's against somebody else. So whether we can compare it or not is something that can be debated. However, both are very high sins, and they should be avoided.
Ahsan Shaykhna. Next question. If Imam Ali really didn't want the Khilafat, then why did he accept it? Why not stay as Imam like he did under the first three caliphs?
He saw a need, and the community needed him, and hence he couldn't turn. In fact, he did say that, find somebody else. He didn't want it, but they insisted and insisted and insisted, and hence he took it on. And even in that short period of time that he did have, he was engaging in battles. He couldn't fully engage in reforming society because of engaging in the battles, etc. So he saw there was a need, and the people needed him, and he couldn't turn people away because they came to his door. This is the character of the Ahlul Bayt. When you go to their door, they don't turn you away.
Ahsan Shaykhna. Next question. How can you balance standing up for truth against oppression and the difficulty with certain statements in relation to oppressive states and the consequences, e.g. losing your job or being labeled negatively?
It's again a very complex situation to be in. One needs to measure out and look at both sides, see the consequences of it. And if you standing up does make an impact, then you may lose something in the process. However, it has an impact in bringing about some form of reform. Then one needs to stand up and not worry about the risk. Allah will provide. Allah has provided and will always provide. Having said that, one also needs to be rational and see the consequences. Like, you can't go to certain countries and condemn the leader of that country, a dictator, because you know that you're going to be killed, for example. And you're going to be killed, you're going to be put in jail. If need be that you need to do that, then do that. But you also need to use your common sense and see the situation.
Ahsan Shaykhna. Next question. If I am doing a sin repeatedly and want to stop but can't do it, I have tried multiple times, what suggestion do you have to help me stop?
There are different ways to stop. And one of the things that actually help is to make that deed or that act undesirable. So I don't know if you've come across this book, Atomic Habits, where it talks about how to do habits, how to bring about habits that are good and to make them desirable so that you do it. Likewise, the flip is, if there's certain deeds that you want to stop, make it undesirable. How do you do that? Well, you have to look at what deed that is, first of all. So, for example, if you waste your time on the computer, for example, how do you make that undesirable? You could limit your Wi-Fi to cut off at a certain point in time. You could block certain websites from the firewall, or ask your ISP to block. These are just examples. That makes it more difficult. So next time you log on, you see that this website or this the internet is cut off, and that would then stall the process of doing it. So to make that deed undesirable. Now, if you go to neuro-linguistic programming, for example, NLP, one of the ways they get people to stop smoking, for example, is to associate smoking with something undesirable. So associate that act with something that you don't like, and then they bring that emotion within. You imagine smoking as being that, and ultimately you get put off. Another way is to have a buddy. If, for example, you want to do something, you want to run every day, get a buddy to help you. Likewise, if you want somebody to keep check on you, so for example, you waste time, you could get a buddy to, bro, or sister, check on me, and we can maybe do something together. So many things that can be done, and inshallah, we can get in touch offline and look at that.
Ahsan Shaykhna. Next question. Why did the Banu Umayyah hate Banu Hashim so much?
There are many factors involved. One is rivalry. The Banu Hashim had this position. Banu Umayyah, although they're both being from the Quraysh, it stems back in history, the rivalry. Secondly is after the first Islamic battles of Badr, etc., many of the close of the Banu Umayyah were killed by Banu Hashim, and hence that again increased the hatred. So in addition to the historical past, there were incidents at the time of the Prophet and after that exasperated that hatred.
Ahsan Shaykhna. Next question. Does Islam allow taking female captives as slaves from war booty?
At that time, that was the custom of taking slaves from war. I would argue that isn't permissible nowadays, because we've reached a stage of understanding slavery is wrong, period. The fuqaha may differ on that. There is definitely a difference of opinion, but because of our understanding, our growth, our human growth, we have reached the conclusion that slavery is wrong, and hence taking anybody as slaves is wrong categorically.
Ahsan Shaykhna. Next question. In the Quran, in chapter 4, verse 24, it says, "And also prohibited to you are all married women except those your right hand possesses." What does it mean?
It means the slave girls. So as I said, the custom at the time was that there was this culture of slave girls or slaves, and the slave girl was halal for the owner of that slave girl. That was the situation. Now, the trajectory that the Prophet set at that time and the Ahlul Bayt, they couldn't come and just abolish slavery. The entire world was dependent economically on that, the buying and selling of slaves. So what did the Prophet do? That he initiated something. He started off the recommendation, the high recommendation of freeing slaves, giving slaves rights. Some would argue that this is a trajectory that the Prophet is setting, that eventually to free slaves, he had to start somewhere, and hence he started recommendation, highly recommending freeing slaves. So if you see in many of these kafara, freeing a slave is up there because it's highly recommended. One can argue that it was so that the Prophet could instill within his community to eventually free slaves. Unfortunately, many Muslims missed the point, the trajectory that he was moving to, and may have not reached that. But Alhamdulillah, humanity has understood that, and slavery is banned today.
Ahsan Shaykhna. And last question for tonight. If Imam Ali pulled the door of Khaybar off, why didn't Abbas or Imam al-Hussein also do such a miracle and kill the whole army of Yazid?
As mentioned in the past few nights, there is a cause and effect in this world. We live in a very physical world. And this physical world is made of matter. And our bodies, our physical bodies, are material, made of matter. And matter has certain characteristics. If you are to put your hand in fire, it's going to burn. We know this. Why wouldn't you wouldn't put yourself in that situation? Because you know that there's a causal effect of putting your hand in fire. Likewise, Imam Ali did that in that situation. We may say that it isn't a miracle, but it's something that is out there, a feat of human experience that is possible. Even one can argue miracles are within this cause and effect world. And Allah Tabatai has an interesting discussion on this. So when Musa puts his staff and turns into a snake, it's all within a material world. We may not understand it, but it's also happening. Eventually, maybe one day we can reach an understanding of transcending or causing change in material from one thing to another. Imam Hussein would have done many things if he had called out to God, but he also understood that he is within a physical world. He isn't a Superman as we make out sometimes to be. He was a very human person, and he lived within this material world, and he fought. And some people exaggerate that Abbas killed, 10,000 people or whatever. And if you do the math, it's impossible for somebody to kill so many people in such a short period of time. They just had a few hours, maximum 2-3 hours. So they were working within a physical world. And Imam Ali did that in that situation that was necessary. Imam Hussein did what was necessary in his situation, both working within the realm of cause and effect.
Ahsan Shaykhna, thank you very much for taking the time to answer our questions again, and as always for your continuing series. Inshallah, we're looking forward to you tomorrow. And now it's time for the Noha. We'll be playing a pre-recorded recitation by Imran Datu, followed by Brother Kurush and Ziad Ashara. And we welcome the Imran Datu by video with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
ए खुदा सैयदा फातिमा खुल्द से देखती है करबला मुस्तफा की आल का घर तमाम जल गया ए खुदा मुस्तफा मुर्तज़ा बाल खोले सैयदा देखती है खाक पर लाशा उस जवान का जो शबीह मुस्तफा जो शबाब मुर्तज़ा हुर्मते अज़ान जो हुसैन का जवान जो बरछी के सीने में ताज कर पैवस्त थी करबला की खाक पर खून उसका था रवा जो हुसैन का जवान जो शबीह है मुस्तफा मुस्तफा की आल का घर तमाम जल गया ए खुदा मुस्तफा मुर्तज़ा ए تمام جل گیا جل گیا اے خدا مصطفیٰ مرتضی اے خدا سینہ تن ہے سیدہ دیکھتی ہے خلد سے ذوالجناح کے پاؤں سے کس طرح سکینہ لپٹی رو رہی ہے زار زار اور پھوپھی ہے اشک کہہ رہی ہے گھوڑے سے میرے بابا کو نہ لے کے جا خدا کے واسطے جو گیا وہ لوٹ کے آ سکا نہ ہے سکینہ ہم کسے سنائے کر رہی ہے التجا مصطفیٰ کی آل کا گھر تمام جل گیا اے خدا مصطفیٰ مرتضی اے خدا سیدہ فاطمہ خلد سے دیکھتی ہے کربلا مصطفیٰ کی آل کا گھر تمام جل گیا جل گیا اے خدا مصطفیٰ مرتضی اے خدا دل فخر سیدہ دیکھتی ہے خلد سے گود میں حسین کی ایک صغیر چاند سا پیاس سے نڈھال تھا مصطفیٰ کی آل تھا حرملا کے تیر نے پیاس کو صغیر کی پل میں بجھا دیا اور پھر حسین نے خون اس صغیر کا اپنے منہ پہ مل لیا اور طلب کے یہ کہا مصطفیٰ کی آل کا گھر تمام جل گیا اے خدا مصطفیٰ مرتضی اے خدا سیدہ فاطمہ خلد سے دیکھتی ہے کربلا مصطفیٰ کی آل کا گھر تمام جل گیا جل گیا اے خدا مصطفیٰ مرتضی اے خدا سیدہ تڑپ گئی دیکھ کر زمین پر اپنے دل کے چین کو سر کٹا پڑا ہوا ریت پر ہے خون میں لاشائے حسین کو ماں نے سینہ پیٹ کر دی صدا رسول کو کہ آئیے گا بابا جان دیکھیے بطول کا گھر تمام کربلا میں کس طرح اجڑ گیا خیمہ ہر ایک لٹ گیا مصطفیٰ کی آل کا گھر تمام جل گیا اے خدا مصطفیٰ مرتضی اے خدا سیدہ فاطمہ خلد سے دیکھتی ہے کربلا مصطفیٰ کی آل کا گھر تمام جل گیا جل گیا اے خدا مصطفیٰ مرتضی اے خدا یا جناب سیدہ ہم غلام آپ کے پرسہ دینے آئے ہیں آپ کے حضور نوح مرثیے کے ساتھ اشک اپنے لائے ہیں یا جناب سیدہ قبول ہو جو لکھا صفدر نے یہ نوح ہے حسین کا عمران نے پڑھا ہے جو لفظ لفظ خوں میں تیر ہے بین کا حرف حرف کی صدا مصطفیٰ کی آل کا گھر تمام جل گیا اے خدا مصطفیٰ مرتضی اے خدا سیدہ فاطمہ خلد سے دیکھتی ہے کربلا مصطفیٰ کی آل کا گھر تمام جل گیا مصطفیٰ مرتضی اے خدا مصطفیٰ مرتضی
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Ahsant. Thank you very much to Brother Imran for his consent in the recitation and the playing of his recitation. Just in the interest of namaz, because it is namaz time now in Leeds, we will just inshallah be reading a small salam to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam by Brother Kurush to finish the night. And inshallah we will be seeing you all tomorrow for the continuation of the Muharram program, and we welcome Brother Kurush with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdillah wa ala arwah allati khallat bi finaik. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر الليل مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى آل الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وعلى أخيك بالفضل العباس وعلى أخته الغراء زينب برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصل اللهم على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Taqabbal Allah. Brother Kurush, taqabbal Allah to you all. Inshallah, do not forget us from your da'as in these sacred nights. And inshallah, we will see you tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum.